So we have a very few minutes, but we are not. We want to answer some questions at least. So please stay with us a bit longer. I would like to start with question to Mike, not just because he was clearly the first to present, but also because I know he will need to leave a certain point. So better to first address some of the questions which came in, and thank you very much for actually asking those questions. Mike, one question, actually, this is the first question which came in. What significant events do you think explain the change in the 80s around the percentage of wealth of the top 10%?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So indeed, there seems to be, and a lot of research has been done by economists on this. The 80s was a very, very sharp shift in nature of wealth and income inequality in the UK, and a number of things. I mean, one of them was obviously changing nature of the labour market, decline of big heavy industry, kind of manufacturing, which tended to mean the reduction of secure, fairly well-paid manual jobs, and that meant in many respects that the nature of routine work deteriorated and the average income declined for those groups. At the top end, however, that was a major period of tax reform in which the government cut top taxation rates quite substantially, and that seems also to have made a big difference in allowing people who are already on good salaries to keep more of their incomes and salaries as take-home money rather than money which went to the taxpayer. UK in the late 70s, the UK's I think if I remember correctly, the top rate of income tax in the UK was 83%. Today it's 45%. So you can see how that shift would make a big difference. And of course, the more you earn, the higher your salary, the more money you will end up in your pocket. So a series of changes. I mean, the Thatcher government was really central to driving these through. That was a big effect, big significant role for the government.
Thanks. There are two questions which are more specific about measures of social class. One says, given what you said about the new class groupings, how useful or otherwise are measures of deprivation such as the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation? And if I can, I'll add another question which is related in terms of major issues. What do you think about the new measure of social class in terms of subjective social status? So the idea that people can do their own cognitive averaging of the amount of economic, cultural, and social capital, and then self-report it.
Well, interesting. I mean, thank you. Yes, look, I'm a pragmatist. We need to use lots of different measures. I don't believe there's one measure only which we should use. And a lot of the time, as came out in the talks, we have to be pragmatic in terms of what the surveys and so on have information about. The overall shift, the overall implication of what I was saying was class isn't just about your occupation and employment and income. It's about wealth and assets. Wealth and assets, a significant chunk of that comes from your neighbourhood in a way, from your housing, comes from your situation in the community. So actually, multiple deprivation indices are actually really important, I think, for triangulating this argument about class, because of the significance of housing assets. So although I can't comment on the details, I think a neighbourhood perspective on class is really significant. And the same applies too about the issue of subjective status. Again, I don't know the details, but I do think actually that one of the problems the old models of class had was it wasn't obvious people themselves knew what they meant. Many people, when they said when we asked you what class do you think you are, they wouldn't necessarily match on to what class you'd be put in by sociologists. On the other hand, people do have more of a sense, I think, about their assets, about their status, about these sorts of things, and I think it maps on better to your actual position in the social structure. You know if you've got lots of money. You know if you're living in a big house and it's worth a lot of money. People often check it up on these websites. So I think in a way this approach to class is more symmetrical. It's more linked in to kind of how people themselves might see status. Thank you.
Another question for you, Mike, is about the intersection, if you want, between social inequality and the other factors. One question in particular says, why do you think socioeconomic status is used as a proxy to measure ethnicity in the UK regarding ethnic inequality, for example, in health? And another one is more about gender. Can you say something about the wealth gap between women and men, and how this wealth gap has changed during the last decade since the 1970s?
Thank you. Yeah, important questions. On the first one about the ethnicity, I'm not, again, I need to know more detailed. I'm not sure it is always used as a proxy, is it, for measuring health inequalities? I thought there are measures of ethnicity which are used too. I'm not an expert. Other speakers, I think, will give you more on that. But I think what is also relevant is the fact that there is, of course, a very strong, associations between ethnicities and where you fit in the class structure. What we found out in the Great British Class Survey was that although quite significant numbers of ethnic minorities have made it, if you like, into the what we call the established middle class, a lot fewer have made it into the elite in our terms. So actually, I think ethnic groups are not evenly distributed as a class structure. There's very clear correlations. With respect to gender, yeah, it's a very interesting question, this, because I was actually talking with a student about it during the week who's doing her PhD on wealth inequalities, and she made the point to me that mostly the surveys we use, and she's using something called the Wealth and Asset Survey, it doesn't allow you to tell. Supposing you own a big house, and 85% of it is owned by the husband and 15% is owned by the wife. There's no question which will get at that in the survey. It becomes kind of opaque currently. So therefore, researchers have to talk about household wealth or individual wealth, and they just aggregate and they just assume it's 50-50 inside the household. We didn't actually know that's the case. So this is a really important area. We do know at the top end, say amongst really wealthy people, there are really few, about 10% of I think billionaires are female. So actually the growth of very large wealthy elites has predominantly been something which men have benefited from. So I think I have a fairly pessimistic view about how the gender distribution is shifting with respect to wealth. Thank you.